Hey everybody, it's Uncle Jim again, and okay, so now we're gonna fix an even bigger hole. And don't panic, it's not as bad as you think. So if you're like most parents and you have devil child at home and say, you know, he's a teenager, he, she, and they're hormonal, and they decide that they're going to put their fist or their foot through the wall. So again, don't freak out. It's actually quite simple to fix, but again, it's just time consuming. So you can either hang Devil Child's picture over the hole, and yeah, that may hide it, but you know the hole's still there, and you're going to have to do something about it. So let me show you how to fix it. So, get rid of him. Now, the most important thing about fixing something like this, you have to know the thickness of your wallboard. They sell several different thicknesses, so this 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, or whatever, so, or 5/8, something like that. So make sure you measure the thickness of your wallboard before you go buy some at the home improvement store. Now the good thing is the home improvement store will sell smaller pieces of wallboard. So I mean, can you imagine trying to get a 4x8 piece of wallboard in a Mini Cooper? I don't think so. So they do sell 2x2 pieces. So make sure you know the thickness. So when you go, you buy a small piece so you can cut your patch. So I know mine's 1/2 inch. So I went ahead and bought myself a 1/2 inch piece so I can make my patch, and let's get started. So okay, so here's my patch. So all I did was just make a simple cut. Now measure, as you can see, measure the size of the hole. Take those measurements to a patch and just cut it so you know it's big enough to hide the hole. So once you have your patch, you're going to take that, and I like to write top on the top of my patch. You're going to put it over the hole, and then you're going to mark it. So that way when you start cutting, it's almost going to be a perfect fit. It won't be perfect, but close enough. So the best thing to do, or what I like to do, is again, take my wallboard saw here, start away from your corner, punch it through gently. Don't go crazy because you're just going to make the hole bigger, and then you probably want to shoot yourself in the head. But just gently tap into it, cut towards the corner, come down, again gently tap, because this is just a prop, I'm going to knock it over. So anyway, gently tap, get it through, saw your hole to the edges, and then saw all the way across, down, so on, so on. So, and another thing to remember, before you start to saw, if you can fit your hand through here, just kind of gently put your hand through and look for some wires. Last thing you want to do, trust me, is start cutting into some household wire that you don't know is there. So just as a precaution, make sure you're looking for pipes, wires, whatever, because you don't want that either. Then you really need a handyman for that. So anyway, so I've cut my patch and I'm ready. So now you're just going to find some wood, and it can be anything. And again, I use scrap for everything. But when you do, make sure you give yourself, make sure it's long enough so you can screw into the wall and hit the wood, and then your patch is going to go over the wood, and then you're going to drill into the wood. So that way it keeps it nice and tight, and it's going to keep it from moving, it's going to keep it secure and all that. So anyway, so that's your patch. And as you can see, I cut the hole using the patch to measure the hole, and I'm going to screw it on there. So we're just going to put a couple screws. And when you do, you want to make sure that your screw head sits below the surface of the wallboard, because you're gonna need to cover it over with the spackle. So I'm going to put the screw. When you put your patch on, get some sandpaper, rough, fine, doesn't really matter. I like to use something a little rougher, and sand your edges. Make sure if there's any of this paper sticking up, let's see, go ahead and tear it off. Give everything a good sanding. And don't worry too much about it, because the plaster is going to hide all this. So give it a good sanding. Use the finer if you want. I like to use the rough stuff because it gives, to me, it gives the plaster something to hold on to. So there we go. So now I'm comfortable putting my plaster over this, and I know I'm going to get a nice flat surface when it's done. So I've got my patch, and there's several different things you can do about this. There's several different types of tape, and this is one of them, and it's sticky on one side, so you can cover the seam, or you can buy this type, and again, you just peel it away. You can stick it on here. It covers the seam. The reason why these are good is because it keeps the seam from cracking. So it just holds things together a little better. The thing I don't like about this, it's very difficult to get a smooth finish without noticing the tape through the plaster. Every time I've used it, you always see these little round holes. They always bleed through, and to me it just doesn't do as good of a job. So I personally don't like to use them. You can if you want to, and you can take your chances, but again, I personally don't like to use these. Now, the thing I'm going to do here, and I've got a demonstration or a sample, I'll show you in a little bit, to show you how well this actually works. So when you start with the plaster, make sure you cover the whole thing. Cover the whole thing. Give it 24 hours to dry. Come back. Do your first sanding. And then when you do, try to get it as flat as you can. And you're going to notice there's some spots that that will need to be replastered. So you're going to put another coat, let it dry, sand it, so on, until you're happy with the end product. So here we go. Here's my sample wall, if you will. And I'll explain this in a second. So basically all I did was cut a hole, patched it just like I showed you. I didn't bother taping it. I just covered it with plaster, sanded it, and I'll show you pictures when the demonstration's over. So sanded it, put some more plaster, sanded it again, and then I wasn't quite happy, so I put a little more plaster, let that dry. And again, this is why it's hard to find somebody to come to do this type of work, because it's so time consuming. You kind of you kind of need to let it dry for 24 hours. Then you have to come back and sand it. And then, again, if it needs some more, you got to put it on there, let it dry, come back, so on, so on. So it's very time consuming, but you can do this. So here's my wall, and as you can see, looks pretty good. You can't really tell that I cut a hole in this, other than this one screw. So what I did, I tried something and it didn't work, but I used a paint stirrer, and unfortunately there's just not enough there for the screw to hold on to. So what happens is the nail popped, or the screw popped. So if you want to try that, my recommendation would be to get a couple of these paint stirrers and put them together and try that. It will work, because as you can see, I've got 4 screws in the paint stirrer and only one of them popped. But if you're in an apartment building or something like that, and somebody above you falls, or you fall, or whatever, and the wall shakes and rattles, this is what's going to happen. And then you're going to have a bigger mess, because then you're going to have to start all over again. So my recommendation to you, get some scrap wood from somewhere, even if it's the home improvement center. Get some scrap wood long enough to cover the hole, like I showed you, so you've got enough that overlaps. You've got something to screw into, especially the patch. Screw your patch on, cover it up, and you're good to go. So that's how you fix these problems. So good luck, and I will see you soon.